I find the simulation hypothesis to be a really interesting one because, as you mentioned, the sort of numbers and the constants needed to get us to where we are today are, you can go away and look at the maths and it's absolutely incredible. And it kind of skeptics tend to say sort of things like, well, if it wasn't the case that we were here, we wouldn't be able to look at the situation to kind of say that we're here, which sounds weird, but basically they're trying to say that, of course, those are the numbers, because if they weren't the numbers, we would never be here to ask those questions. So, it must just kind of come about, and they kind of then stipulate or begin to explore the idea of a multiverse, which I know you've addressed elsewhere on other shows before. But I find the idea of a simulation to be exceptionally interesting because, and this is going on a bit of a tangent, but it kind of feeds into a little bit of people's idea of purpose and their idea of destiny. It might sound really strange, but there are certain characters within history who seem to have a feeling throughout their lives of they're going to go on to become these sort of classic destiny figures. Like an example would be Winston Churchill. From a very young age believed he would go on to save Great Britain from some sort of invasion. Then lo and behold, 40 years later or 50 years later, he's kind of the Prime Minister during World War II, and he's literally doing what he thought he would be doing when he's like a teenager, which is fascinating, this idea of destiny. And there's almost seems to be this sort of kind of print on individuals to suggest that there is something they're trying to get towards, even if they're not quite sure how they're going to bring that about. So I don't know, could you kind of sketch out the simulation hypothesis a little bit more, and kind of, and I guess for me, the way it breaks down is it's layered. You're just kind of pushing if you stipulate the simulation hypothesis to be correct, you're pushing the issue just to another layer you can't get to. Like there are advanced aliens or some other sort of species that's got us on a floppy disk somewhere and is kind of programming us to see how we'd respond in situations. But then you kind of got the same thing. Well, they're going to have certain constants to bring themselves about anyway as well. So there's still the same problem there. So it's an interesting hypothesis, but it doesn't seem to actually kind of get us much further than A to begin with. Like we want to get from A to B, right? But it seems to just be, it could be going back to A just from looking at it as a sort of concept. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you worry about this. It's the equivalent of the who designed the designer objection or something. But just start briefly on the point you touched on there about what I think is the most common response to fine-tuning online, which is, well, if it hadn't been fine-tuned, we wouldn't be here to know about it. People often give this bloody Douglas Adams puddle thing I've heard about a million times. The puddle who wakes up and says, oh, this hole is perfectly suited for me. And people think this is a very clever, devastating objection. But, of course, it's true that it's obviously true that we wouldn't be here to know about it if the universe was fine-tuned. But it's hard to see why that makes a difference to the argument. It's still okay. It's still incredibly improbable, the fine-tuning, and it still seems like that cries out for explanation. And when we put the argument in more precise Bayesian terms, it's just hard to see why that what's often called the anthropic principle, that if the universe hadn't been fine-tuned, we wouldn't have been here to know about it. Why that makes a difference, and a lot of people are. So I don't think it's a particularly popular objection in the literature, because I think because I think a lot of people are impressed by what's his name, the firing squad analogy by a really big philosopher on fine-tuning who's my mind's gone blank on now, but he said, well, imagine you're about to be executed, there's, I don't know, 5 people about to shoot you, and they all miss. You think, okay, God, that was a bit weird, and they reload and they keep missing, and they there's really good trained shotsmen, they keep missing you, and you think, oh my God, something's going on here. That either this is a fake execution, or something's going on. It's just too much of a coincidence. But of course, you could say, well, if they had hit me, I wouldn't be here to know about it. So maybe I shouldn't think it's a fluke. Well, that's true, but you still think that something needs explaining here. So, although having said that, there are some people, Elliot Sober, who's a really good philosopher on this area, who does develop that kind of response to the fine-tuning. So it's not that no serious thinkers here develop that view. But anyway, yeah, simulation hypothesis. This is much explored in David Chalmers' recent book aimed at general audience, Reality Plus. And but it was originally, I mean, maybe not originally, but one key argument for it is the argument Nick Bostrom gave in the noughties for the simulation hypothesis, which is independently of all this fine tuning stuff. His reasoning was, look, as technology advances, as AI advances, at some point we're going to get lots of universe simulations. We're going to get lots and lots of simulations because it will be so easy to do, and there's going to be an interest to do it. And so at some point, there's going to be lots of simulations of universes like ours in the future. And those simulations of universes like ours are presumably going to massively outnumber the number of concrete, physical, real universes, let's say just one. And so if you're thinking across all of space and time, there's going to be vastly more simulated universes than there are real physical universes. And then it just becomes a sort of probability game. Well, how likely is it that we are in the one universe that's actually physical rather than one of the simulated ones? So it's a very interesting argument. And I suppose my response to it is one assumption of the argument is that a computer simulation would be conscious. That's a very crucial consideration in the argument, whereas I'm inclined to think that actually simulating consciousness would not itself produce consciousness, real feelings and thoughts. So a computer simulation of my brain, even with all the detail, wouldn't have my consciousness. I guess in the way a computer simulation of a hurricane isn't really wet. And this is something I argued with David Chalmers on my podcast, Mind Chat. Quick plug. When I had him on, we argued back and forth about this. So that would be my problem with it. But I think it could be a good explanation of fine-tuning, setting that worry I've just given on one side. Your worry was, which is a good one, is, well, wouldn't the problem reoccur? Because we then have to ask, how did the universe of the simulator get to be fine-tuned? Well, I think what you could say is, well, maybe their universe isn't fine-tuned. Because fine-tune. It's a recent discovery that for life to be possible, the numbers in physics have to fall in this narrow range, right? That wasn't obvious. It could be in the simulator's universe. The numbers in physics didn't have to fall in a narrow range. Maybe physics was more flexible, and also, most kind of constants in their physics would have given rise to life. So obviously the simulator's universe is going to be life conducive, but it doesn't follow that their universe has to be fine tuned in this very specific way in order to be life conducive. So I think it is a good intriguing response to the argument, but I have these worries about whether a simulation would really be conscious. Good on the destiny point, actually. Sorry, is an interesting one to raise. And Chalmers suggests for people who have very blessed lives, that they should really expect maybe they're in some kind of simulation. Or one thing I worry about is maybe all of us we're really in some utopian future where we've cured all the ills of the world, and there's no problems, but we're really bored. There's nothing left to do. So maybe we plug ourselves into simulations and live out lives of people from the past as a bit of fun, and then you get to your deathbed and it'll say game over, and you'll be back to this boring sort of future utopia. And if you've got a very life full of suffering, that's probably unlikely that you chose that. But if you've got quite a happy life where you're doing what you want to do, interesting things happen, maybe this is, you should take seriously that this possibility that you've voluntarily put yourself in some kind of simulation. Anyway, fun things to think about.
If you enjoyed this clip, then head on over to Locals to access the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version, and everyone can access the audio-only version of the conversation. I'll see you over there.